Warning, this content may be disturbing to some audiences. Subscribe. If you dare.
Every time we had ice cream at the crew restaurant, people would say it was because they had to empty the freezer to put in a dead body. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. Cruise ship workers of Reddit. What was the biggest oh shit moment on the boat, that luckily, passengers didn't find out about at all?
Number 1.
I worked on a cruise ship for 3 years. I've got a lot of these kinds of stories, but here's my favorite one. Our ship officers got a call from a ship of a completely different cruise line, off the coast of Cozumel, Mexico. They found one of our passengers floating in the ocean. He wasn't even near the shore at all, just floating in open water. He was alive and perfectly fine. They reviewed the security footage, and in the middle of the night this guy was drunk on deck 5, and could be seen holding his phone, dancing to music by himself. He then climbed onto one of the lifeboats, and did a running jump into the ocean. He left his phone on top of the lifeboat. His body was so fluid from being drunk that he wasn't injured when he hit the water. The cruise ship spotted him and rescued him. His family didn't know he was missing because he had booked a separate room. This guy told the news that a rogue wave pushed him off the side of the ship. He was on deck 5, so the wave would have been over 40 feet tall. Don't know what happened after that. The entire crew was talking about it for weeks before it hit the news, though.
Number 2.
I worked on a ship almost 15 years ago and I have so many stories. This happened to a friend of mine. A family came on. They had a teenage son, who was not interested in the cruise. As soon as the family got to their room, he jumped off his balcony, which is insanely dangerous. They fished him out, and the family got kicked off the ship. Another fact, there is a small jail-like area, called a brig. On my ship it was on the crew floor, and it had a one-way mirror. Usually it was used for drunk or disruptive passengers. We once had an entertainer find out his ex was coming on the ship. That made him a little stabby, so they put him in the brig until the next port.
Number 3.
There are small fires in places like the kitchens that happen somewhat regularly. Most of the time they're controlled quickly and no one even knows they happened. People drop dead all the time, especially on some of the nicer lines that are basically floating retirement homes. Ironically, it's when there's a survivable medical emergency that guests become aware of it, when they need to do an emergency evacuation either by tender boat or helicopter. One of the ships I worked on, a guest jumped off an open deck while we were at sea. He survived though. I think he was super drunk more than he was suicidal. Norovirus outbreaks happen regularly. A literal oh shit moment for some people. Probably the worst accident that happened during my tenure was when a kid literally put his eye out on a ball valve handle on one of the open decks. Pretty sure word spread quickly on that one though.
Number 4.
Most of the computer systems on cruise ships run on Windows 7, including all of the automation in the machinery space, security system, fire detection system, etc. When Windows updates, it will restart the computers, as it does with a normal desktop. Unfortunately, it can also take out every computer at the same time, causing us to be flying blind until it finishes. People may be more worried to hear that there is a hole in the hull, yet they're actually fairly common occurrences in older ships and easily plugged. Fires happen occasionally. The most terrifying was a crankcase explosion. The fire suppression systems are good at extinguishing them quickly enough though, so they're not even a concern to the crew, unless Windows is updating at the time. A crankcase explosion doesn't mean the engine is in pieces. Oil mist inside the crankcase explodes and the resulting blast is pushed out through the blast doors. Also, the fire suppression system is independent. That was a joke. The monitoring system is Windows based and just means we can't see what sensors or which sprinklers have been activated. The speed and fueling controls on an engine are mechanical and the local control is pneumatic, so keeping it running isn't a concern. All of the auxiliary systems are controlled by the computer system and are passed into local control, and controlled by the watchkeeper, if and when it occurs.
Number 5.
One story that comes to mind with passengers, travel agents and family was the first sailing out of the yard. The ship can hold about 4,500 passengers, she's a big girl, and has 5 or 6 massive engines to power it. About 3 hours into the sail away, I heard a loud thump and massive vibrations all around the ship. I was in an empty restaurant and saw plates and cups crashing to the ground from the vibrations. My first thought is to always see how the crew reacts. If they are calm, you can stay calm. If they freak out, you better start moving. I could see some concern, but they continued on with their business, so I followed their lead and continued doing my work too. About 3 to 4 hours after that, another loud thump and even more vibrations, then silence. After speaking with a few crew members, we found out we lost 2 engines on the initial incident, and now we just lost the rest. Whatever the reason was, we lost complete propulsion, and this beast of a ship was going to go wherever the ocean wanted it to. Passengers were notified that we will be running late, but to continue having fun and drinks were on the house. No other info was given, smart to avoid panic. About 12 hours later, a helicopter was seen above us dropping down crates of engine parts, and a short time after that, we had propulsion again. Passengers had no idea why we were delayed and didn't seem to care.
Number 6.
I provide software and services for most of the major cruise lines and spend a lot of time cruising. On the new builds is when you see a lot of crazy stuff happening. When a brand new ship is built, they have to go through what's called sea trials. This is a full systems check for multiple reasons, biggest ones being safety, emissions, and engine/navigation testing. This happens without passengers, and a lot of stuff breaks usually. They will list the ship, lean it all the way to one side, as hard as they can, and hold position while doing a circle or figure 8 pattern in the water. I had a 600 pounds wine cooler, fully stocked, fall face down about 12 away from me while installing a PC at a bar. It sounded like a stick of dynamite exploding from the pressure of all the bottles hitting and simultaneously breaking. I froze staring at it, and as I started to come out of the initial shock, 4 security crew members came running around the corner, no one else around except me, and about $10,000 in broken wine, and the cooler wasn't cheap either. I just stuck my hands in the air, and slowly exited the scene. I'm pretty sure if I was standing 1 foot to the right it wouldn't have been pretty for me. Found out the yard workers forgot to bolt it down, as per protocol. Oops.
Number 7.
I used to work for the cruise lines in Alaska as management in their land-based operations. For many, many people it is the ultimate dream trip, and cruises are the only way for them to achieve it. I loved my job, but when guests would come to me and ask me how I got here, how I liked it, and then say, "I wish I had done this when I was your age. When my knees worked and my back didn't ache all the time." So many people who were probably taking their last trips. I always handed out info for them to give to their grandkids about working for us, lol. And also, yes, I spent a lot of time coordinating guests getting their forgotten heart medicine, arranging wheelchair transport, and yeah, dealing with the occasional death.
Number 8.
Commenter: ship just arrived in Whittier, Alaska, the port for Anchorage. An elderly passenger dropped dead while walking down the gangway. A conflict ensues between the port security and the ship's medical team. The port security didn't want the ship's medical team to get involved because it technically happened off the ship and the local authorities had jurisdiction. There really was no saving for the guy, but the ship's medical team at least wanted to try, but the local authorities wouldn't even allow the chief medical officer to start CPR. The coroner had an approximate 6-hour ETA, so the port authorities bagged up the body and stuffed it in an X-ray machine storage container in port, guarded by local police, until the coroner could arrive to take the body to Anchorage. The wife of the deceased continued on to finish the vacation for the 7-day rail trip to Denali. It was a 14-day gimmick. 7 days at sea, 7-day scenic rail trip. My understanding was the cruise line comped her entire vacation, arranged for the remains to be returned home at no cost to her, and provided a personal escort/assistant for the remainder of her vacation. Person B: WTF. What sort of authorities would refuse qualified personnel the opportunity to do CPR and possibly save a human life? I find it disturbing that a port authority would rather take care of a corpse than having to ship someone to a hospital after a successful CPR.
Number 9.
Commenter: water pipe burst in a storeroom and soaked all of the spare toilet paper. This was on day 2 of a 14-day voyage to Antarctica. The cabin stewards had to swap around rolls of paper between low-use and high-use guest cabins, and it came right down the wire. None of the guests found out or realized. Now toilet paper is hidden in every cabin instead of a centralized location. Person B: the day I learned that there was an optimal storage pattern for toilet paper on a ship. Person C: decentralized is almost always a better system for storage of anything. Unless there's a high risk of theft or something and you need to pay security guards.
Number 10.
I used to be a crew member, and one time a guy working at the front desk jumped overboard after a crew party. He was found a few hours later by the Coast Guard, and everybody was asked to be discreet in order to keep the cruise running smooth, and everything was fine until the captain came on the PA and said we were delayed because a crew member jumped overboard. Then the madness begins, rumors appear out of nowhere, and the rest of the cruise was pretty much guests asking what happened the whole time. A lot of shit happens on board. I could write a book, maybe even more than one. Another time a guy committed suicide in his cabin, and his family was on board, including a little girl, but this time it didn't leak to the guests. I saw the family as they were being escorted to the security office. It felt so bad for them. A friend of mine got fired for getting wasted, got pissed and started peeing all over his cabin while the security guys were there to take care of him. He spent the night in the little jail on board before being dumped the next day in whatever port we were. Also, every time we had ice cream at the crew restaurant, people would say it was because they had to empty the freezer to put in a dead body.
Number 11.
Commenter. One time I was on a cruise, and a few cabins down, a man and woman who were cheating on their wife and husband, respectively, got super drunk and fell over the edge of their balcony from really high up. It was at night too. The whole cruise ship stopped once it was reported, and it took like an entire day to search for them. Apparently the man had his jeans or something because he had inflated them somehow and they were floating holding them. They reported that they were stung by multiple jellyfish and were super cold the whole time. That must have been the scariest, most terrible 18 hours of their lives. Person B. Whoa. It's so smart that he inflated his jeans. Person C. He was more than likely in Boy Scouts at one point. They pushed that very hard in Boy Scouts. Make sure to share your personal story in the comments below and have the opportunity to be featured in a future video. Also, if you like these topics, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button to continue seeing more content like this every day. See you next time.